All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session on zero waste business for community resilience. So, my name is Celia Risto, and I will be moderating today's session along with three fantastic speakers we'll introduce in a moment. So, we have three wonderful folks joining us today, and I'm looking forward to hearing them share case studies on how businesses and their partners can contribute to community resilience through incorporating zero waste practices into their operations. So as a sort of background on today's session, first I'll give a brief introduction to each of our speakers, and then we'll kick things off. And then we will have some time at the end for questions, so please feel free to post yours in the chat throughout today. We'll kind of keep track of them and we'll address them after all three speakers have presented. So before we dive in, a little bit of background. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, my name is Celia Risto, and I currently serve as the certification manager for the True certification for zero waste. And before that, I worked in zero waste for 7 years across a variety of settings, including with a few folks who are here today. So it's a real pleasure to me to be here and to get to introduce the next folks. Next slide, please. So our first speaker today will be Natalie Lessa. Natalie is a founder and principal consultant at Recreate Waste Collaborative based in Los Angeles, where one of her key roles is navigating stakeholders through California's legislative requirements around materials management, among many, many other things. So we'll hear from Natalie today on strategies for implementing local single-use plastic policies with community input and engagement. Next slide, please. After Natalie speaks, we'll hear from Sarah Fuentes. Sarah is co-founder and president of Smart Waste and will be sharing a fantastic case study with findings from work on decommissioning and responsibly downsizing. At Smart Waste and outside of it, Sarah makes time for generous mentorship to women working in sustainability and clean tech, sharing guidance from her 10+ years of experience in the waste and recycling industry. So looking forward to that one as well. Thank you for being here, Sarah. And then next slide. And our final speaker is Lael Giebel, Director of Global Sustainability at Novmber. Lael will take us through the journey of working towards zero waste at Novmber, including key successes, challenges, and takeaways. As her bio demonstrates, she has a track record of setting and implementing ambitious sustainability goals and is the author of an upcoming book about sustainable business. So as mentioned, we will have time after Lael's talk for questions for all three speakers. So please feel free to share yours throughout or just pop them in the chat at the end. Whatever works for you, we'll keep track. And with that, we'll look forward to kicking off. So I'll turn the podium over to you, Natalie, for the first talk.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Celia. What an honor to be at this conference and to be speaking with Sarah and Lael today. So thank you for having us. Thank you for the audience for joining us on this topic. We will be discussing, as Celia mentioned, zero waste business for community resilience. And my presentation today is focused on strategies for implementing local single-use plastic policies. My goal for you is that you are able to take some actual tangible strategies from this presentation and apply these to your own community. These will apply to you if you're a recycling coordinator at a municipality, if you're an activist with a nonprofit, or if you work for a business and you're interested in moving more towards zero waste. I'll present you with 5 strategies and some steps that you can take based on a project that I managed for the city of Palm Springs. Next slide, please. So just a quick company overview. Recreate is a consulting company that's based in Southern California. We really serve as the boots on the ground implementation of recycling and organics recycling programs. We work across the country with municipalities, nonprofits, and businesses to implement these policies. We do edible food recovery work with businesses and single-use plastic implementation, as we're talking about today. Next slide. So before we dig into strategies, just the mile-high idea, the problem of what we're talking about here. So no surprise probably to most of the folks that are in the room today, but in the United States, we consume a lot of products. We have a fast-paced culture here that makes us highly reliant on fossil fuels. And that leads to the production of plastic, which is 4% of fossil fuels that are extracted are used for the plastics industry. Single-use plastics end up used quite often in food establishments like restaurants, grocery stores for packaging, cafeterias, and other marketplaces. And the problem with that is that across the country, we really lack the infrastructure to capture those materials and to process those plastics to turn them into new products, like more traditional beverage containers, for example. There's also low participation in recycling programs. Across the country, we either lack the education or the infrastructure to capture those materials and people participating in the programs that do exist. And of course, there's contamination with plastics, especially in food serving businesses. We know that we can't recycle a clamshell that's covered in salad and salad dressing. It's dirty at that point. So this poses a pretty big problem for our recycling infrastructure and for the amount of plastic that ends up out in the environment because of so much that's used in restaurants. So we know that this ends up in the natural environment. We see it all over our beaches, unfortunately. We see this impacting our marine life and of course the local landfills. So it's a pretty big problem, as I mentioned, you're likely aware. And so now let's sort of dig into what to do about it. Next slide, please. A solution is to implement a single-use plastic policy. So specifically in California, there are approximately 50 cities that have implemented one version or another of a single-use plastic policy. California Senate Bill 54 recently reinforced a lot of these existing policies, but that will take significant time to make these changes. Policies are great. They really lay the foundation for us for behavior change and new programs, but how will they be implemented? And that's what we'll dig into. Next slide, please. The first strategy for you to consider is to build in time for community feedback during the policy writing process. So there's not often or always time to plan for hearing from the community when you're writing policy, but it's really important that you engage at least one of these stakeholder engagement strategies. Depending on how much time and resources you have, you might want to even engage a few of these, sort of depending on website usage, print materials, social media. So the idea here is that you're hearing from the community, you're identifying what challenges the businesses think they might have from implementing a policy, and you're really getting them to be part of the actual process of developing the policy, which will help later down the road when you actually implement the program. Because ideally, we're kinking out some of the issues beforehand as we're writing the policy. So these are some examples of what we did for the city of Palm Springs. We engaged a survey for all of the nearly 200 businesses there to understand what their current practices were and how what the city was offering could really be of value to the businesses. They also hosted a webinar. They sent out print mailers to the businesses to encourage them to be a part of the process so that hopefully when this policy gets passed, it's not a surprise to the community. Next slide, please, which is our next strategy, which is to plan for an implementation phase to offer businesses technical assistance. So we just talked about stakeholder engagement. That can take anywhere between 1 to 3 months. Likely during that time, you're also writing your policy, which can take 6 months up to years sometimes. But once your policy is passed, you really want to plan for up to at least 6 months of technical assistance before the effective date. And the reason for that is you really want to develop relationships with businesses to see true success in the program and to see real change. And developing strong relationships will be really crucial for seeing that change. And when you go into businesses and provide technical assistance, it's a lot easier to say, hey, this is coming, next year you will be required to make these changes, rather than going in and saying, hey, you're already required. It sort of just puts a bad taste in the business's mouth because they want to be supported and they want to be empowered to make changes. So as much as you can, carve out some time in your process before the effective date and definitely before enforcement, where you're providing a deep level of assistance to the businesses. Next slide. Our third strategy is to develop and provide resources. So this again goes along with supporting the business community. Here's a list of strategies that you can use. So you might want to develop a resource packet that can include language from the ordinance, guides. You can include customer signage like you see here, which we would encourage businesses to display that. It sort of showed customers that, look, this is coming from the city rather than the business, because businesses are concerned with their competing businesses having an advantage. So if we can just say this is an entire citywide program and show the customer that, the businesses sort of preferred that display. You could include employee training guides, purchasing guides to point businesses to where they might find replacement products to the single-use plastic. You might want to do preferable purchasing where you buy bulk compostable or reusable products and make those available to your community of businesses. If you do offer exemptions, you'd want to offer exemption forms or scholarship forms if you have funding available. And then I'll also offer a space for the businesses to come and meet with other businesses through some sort of roundtable would be a good idea. Next slide. Here are some more examples of what print material is available. You could do social media. This is used in Marin County, so you definitely want to mix up what your approach is for resources. So print, digital, social media, videos, just sort of knowing that not everyone looks in the same place for their information. So as much as you can have a comprehensive communication campaign is going to benefit you. Next slide. The fourth strategy is to just know, if you're the one planning this program or you're involved in the implementation, that change takes time, and usually businesses need to be revisited. They need continued support. I'd recommend once a month going in if you have the ability to do that, at least quarterly, because programs do fall off. And the more that you can show businesses that this is a priority and that they are supported and that also people are paying attention to what they're doing, will eventually create the change, especially for those that need more help than other businesses. Like this example here on the left, you can see this business was using pretty much all styrofoam, which was banned in the city of Palm Springs. And after 3 visits, we got them to convert everything to compostable products. So that was really through continuing to offer the technical assistance, the resources, the purchasing, showing them where they could purchase these products, and just kind of having that constant pressure over time did see results in some of these harder to implement businesses. Next slide. Our final strategy is to recognize businesses that are doing a good job and incentivize participation. So you want to identify advocates in the community that might help you and help your organization with promoting this program and kind of fostering support for it. You might want to invite businesses to future presentations with either like the Chamber of Commerce or even at City Council meetings, so that you can highlight businesses that are doing a great job. That really goes a long way for businesses that are sort of having to go out of their way to make these changes. If they feel like they're acknowledged for those efforts, it really just goes a long way. You could also do that by highlighting businesses on your organization's webpage, maybe add a map that shows where certain sustainable businesses are located. You could also offer free marketing or ad space in local publications to help promote the business, promote them on social media, provide visual recognition through window stickers or stars or the little hamburger stands on tables. Again, really just encouraging the business to continue with their practices and showcasing them as a leader in the community and sustainability. It's just really important. And then finally, prioritize these businesses as part of your own organization's catering. If you have parties, if you ever go out to lunch as a team. So our team was out in the community of Palm Springs quite a bit, visiting all these hundreds of businesses. And we went back to our favorite, most sustainable businesses often. And that's really what businesses need, right? Is more business. So we would meet with them. We developed really great relationships with these guys at El Atelier Cafe and Aspen Mills in Palm Springs. So really just we want to encourage people to continue doing the right thing and thank them for what they do. Next slide. just wanted to leave you with some resources here. Hopefully we can share links as part of this conference. There's some really great resources that were helpful for me at least. So CalRecycle has a list of acceptable products on their website that has just so many options for compostable, fiber-based, or recyclable products that businesses could be purchasing. The Recycling Partnership, just so many resources on their website for signage, grant opportunities. There's lots of money available for implementing circular economy projects. SurveyMonkey is what we use for doing surveys. You could also use Google Forms, so that's an important tool for engaging your stakeholders. Upstream Solutions, Reusable LA Coalition, Surfrider Foundation, these are all really leading organizations in this work. So if you're not familiar, I'd encourage you to check out their resources. The map you see here is Surfrider Foundation, Ocean Friendly Restaurant, sort of database that you can go to the website as a customer and see which businesses are already leaning towards zero waste that you might want to go for your next date night. So there's lots of great resources here, and I encourage you to look more deeply into those. I think that's our last slide. If you can go to the next. Yeah, so thanks again. Thanks again for being here. Thank you for tuning into our presentation and for taking it upon yourself to learn more about National Zero Waste. And I believe at this point, I will pass it on to Sarah Fuentes. Thank you.
What a great presentation. Thank you so much. Can you guys hear me? Maybe, yes? Hopefully.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Natalie, for that. I just want to quickly just introduce myself again, Sarah Fuentes from Smart Waste. Also have a podcast called Trash Magic, so definitely love to talk trash. So today we have the privilege, and we've kind of said this, but I want to take a quick second to first and foremost acknowledge everyone on this call today, and thank you for being here first and foremost. It says a lot about who you are and kind of how you want to continue to learn to implement this ideology around zero waste. And also I want to acknowledge all the communities out there that are dealing with some of the aftermath of some poor infrastructure. And there's a lot of communities out there that are dealing with poor infrastructure that Natalie just mentioned. Today I have the opportunity to discuss this topic around decommissioning and downsizing responsibly. And just to kind of go into what decommissioning means, what I've noticed since 2020 is through COVID, we had a big turnout of corporations closing and downsizing. And that posed a big problem for corporations in handling their waste stream. And so today I'm going to talk and share a little bit about a case study that Smart Waste participated in a project in San Francisco. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So the initial facility was based out of San Francisco. It was an often built office building, approximately 116,000 square feet, over 6 stories of office space. And so we had the opportunity to save over $77,000 in the budget, and we've also prevented over 211,000 pounds of waste going to the landfill through sustainable decommissioning. So I just want to kind of give you some of the big highlights out there up front. That first and foremost, that we can divert material from the landfill through decommissioning, and that we can save money doing it through a sustainable process. If we can go to the next slide, please. So some of the high level results that I just want to kind of share with you is that we were able to avoid $84,000 in disposal costs through implementing a decommissioning program sustainability wise. Also, in terms of actual cost savings, there was 77,000 cost savings. The client earned $24,000 in rebates, so which we can kind of get into what materials equal what we call focus materials or high value materials, which is typically IDF material from the data center rooms. And then we were able to reach a very high level diversion from this particular project. And we were able to do this simultaneously by supporting local school districts and homeless shelters, which brings in this resilience aspect of having a resilient community and having businesses support the community as well, creating this circular economy. If we can go to the next slide, please. So the challenge that we had during the decommissioning, first and foremost, was that we had over 166,000 square feet. We had over 500 workstations and office spaces that we had to figure out what we were going to do. Hundreds of pieces of ancillary furniture and whiteboards and office material, and then the data center rooms that we also had to decommission, which is these highly valued materials, electronic waste materials, servers and batteries and whatnot. And then some of the other challenges as well was just making sure that the facility was well maintained after the client left. And then in some cases in decommissioning, there's a requirement of pulling the cables from the walls. And that was another thing that they wanted to make sure that they had properly handled and recycled. So this major challenge was definitely getting it organized in a way and itemizing it in a way to where we can find a downstream for. The next slide, please. So the solution is that workplace operations and a lot of enterprise businesses, they have workplace operations that manages decommissions in tandem with their facilities team. So oftentimes they have a way of they are used to doing things. And a lot of this way is just getting a dumpster and throwing everything in the dumpster and then having the budget to cover the cost for the landfill of those material and then the labor to break down all this, material that is in a facility. So the workplace operations had sought us out. And so our focus during this decommissioning in the initial steps was to get a proper inventory so then we can find homes for the material within this facility. Our focus was to recycle, to repurpose, and also to negotiate with the landlord what materials we can actually leave behind, such as workplace stations and furnitures that would help them have a plug and play for when someone else came in to rent their facility. It was substantially easier. Mind you, keep in mind, this is all during the peak of COVID. The other major challenge is that we didn't want to get COVID, so we'll start with that. And then also the strict time frame that we had to decommission the facility from when the employees left the facility and to when the last day that we had to be out of the building was approximately 6 weeks. So we had 6 weeks to remove everything out of this facility in a responsible manner. So that was definitely part of the challenge. And then the solution was us having the partnerships in place to be able to recycle or repurpose or donate some of these items. We can go to the next slide, please. So during this process, we have worked with several groups within workplace operations and facilities to identify an inventory and then identify which items should go into what categories, such as reusing. So when I say reusing, I mean internally within the corporation, because a lot of times big enterprises, they might need something that they can use from another facility, but the right hand's not talking to the left hand, so they don't know. So we were able to really identify which items could be used internally within that company's own enterprise. Then we were able to auction material off, where we have an online auction and we're able to auction material directly from the site and then have the buyer come directly to the site to remove the material or whatever it was that they purchased to avoid this double handling and avoid the landfill. And then also, which was the other aspect, was donation. We did work with local homeless shelters and local school districts and some other local nonprofits to donate some of this equipment and materials within this facility. And, some of these homeless shelters were really appreciative of the donations that they received, bringing, this resilience aspects to the direct community within the businesses and how they can influence them. Next slide, please. Now, the final report, which just kind of goes back into the beginning of our conversation, which was we were able to divert over 200,000 pounds of material from the landfill. We avoided over $84,000 in landfill costs. So if we were to throw away everything that we recycled, donated, or sold, this is how much hypothetically it would have cost us to landfill it, which is a lot of money. Through the recovery of these high-valued focused materials such as electronic waste material, and being that Smart Waste is R2V3 certified, we were able to compensate the client $24,000 in rebates of getting them money for this material from their IDF rooms. And then last and not least was omitting the cost of labor of almost $500,000 to be able to do this in a sustainable way. We were able to save labor because we were able to find homes for all the workstations, for all the furnitures, and negotiate with the property manager some of these things, which then eliminated the cost of labor to decommission the facility. And let's see, if I think this might be our last slide. If we can go to the next. Yes, so this is the last slide. So one of the major things that I would like to say, and hopefully that everybody can take away, is that when you're decommissioning a big facility, whether it's 50,000 square feet or 1,000,000 square feet, the most important thing, in my professional opinion, is getting a proper inventory of what you are getting rid of. This was critical to the success of this particular project, and the operations manager, and I had asked her why, what's something that you think that why do we go around this route? And she said, just because we're used to doing things a certain way doesn't mean that we can't create a new, better way to do things. And it might entail a little bit of more work up front, but the results were so amazing, in my opinion, of the cost savings and able to divert the material because we were able to put some of the upfront work in and getting a proper inventory of what exactly was in the facility. With that being said, my name is Sarah Fuentes. I look forward to connecting with everybody online and on LinkedIn. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Thank you again for having me today. Please put any questions in the chat. Now, I have the privilege of introducing Leo, my new friend now, and I'm excited to hear what she has to say about her company, New 4B.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Thank
Yes.
you. That was a fantastic presentation, and thank you also to Natalie. It's such an honor to be on the panel with these two august women. And thank you to all of you for tuning in. So again, I'm Lael. I'm with the company Novmber. Next slide. And so just real quick, Novmber is the world's largest security awareness training and simulated phishing platform, and it's used by over 50,000 organizations globally. So we have about over 1,600 employees in total, and about 1,300 of those are in the US. And then we have in total 12 country offices, and we are headquartered in Clearwater, Florida. Next slide. So we created our zero waste plan modeled after the True Zero Waste. I became a True Zero Waste certified advisor just weeks before I started with Novmber, and their template and their training was invaluable in terms of creating our zero waste plan. So I definitely recommend that. Our plan is 30 pages long. Some of the highlights and some of the successful actions that we have put into place at the headquarters are: we created an environmentally preferred purchasing policy, which I would definitely recommend folks do. We moved our mindset from just recycling over to reducing and repurposing, and then finally recycling. We have implemented employee training, which really helped a lot, and I would definitely recommend that as well. We got creative, and I will talk about a little bit more about that later. In fact, I'll talk about each of these items later. And then we emphasize employee engagement, and that to me was a huge part of our success, and again, something that I would recommend. Next slide. So by the numbers, we wrote our initial plan and got that approved by the powers that be in about 3 months. We did hit our first diversion rate goal in 1 year. We set it for 1 year, and it was right about the 365-day mark that we hit that. We've been running our zero waste plan comprehensively for about 1.5 years. And then when we started, we were recycling or diverting all of 3 items, and now we're diverting 18 items. Next slide. So again, I won't go over this entire list, but you can see there on the left, when I started at KnowBe4, we were recycling all of paper, cardboard, and then we were able to count paper that had not been ordered because we had already started to digitize our platform and our administration. And now we are predominantly reducing and repurposing and then finally recycling things. A lot of donation happens, that sort of thing. Next slide. So employee training, according to the Green Business Bureau, employee engagement and training is a must. I obviously agree with this wholeheartedly. To that end, we've created 24 educational videos, and those are very simple videos we've just done on an iPhone. So anyone watching can, I'm sure, create a video that would be helpful for your employees or your folks in your organization. We have over 100 intranet posts at this point. Every week I post something called Green Tips. That's our little intranet blog. And then we have 1 internal course that every single one of our employees takes at KnowBe4. And then just sort of as an example, sort of a real life example, that round sticker there you see there, No Stirs Recycle, that's a sticker about this size. And we put it on every single cardboard box that leaves our facilities. And we don't ship a lot. We don't have a physical product, but we do have to ship equipment to our remote employees and that sort of thing. And every single person gets that sticker. And it's just a reminder to, hey, recycle this or reuse this box. Don't just throw it away. Next slide. So in terms of creative measures, we recycled metal cabinets. So this is sort of a microcosm of what Sarah was talking about in decommissioning. This is just one item, but we had 100 metal cabinets. And before I got to KnowBe4, whenever they had stuff that they needed to get rid of, they would actually call a junk hauler. And so they were prepared to call a junk hauler with this, but luckily they got with me first. And now we never, by the way, we never call junk haulers anymore. But so we took these metal cabinets. I found a place right in the Tampa Bay area that would recycle them and pay us for them. So we went from paying a junk hauler to now getting paid for the recycled material and diverting nearly 14,000 pounds from the waste stream. So that's sort of a microcosm of that decommissioning that Sarah was talking about. Next slide. One of my favorite sort of creative measures we did is this repurposing effort. So you can see there, those top 2 pictures on the left. One is a huge banner that was flown by an airplane over Clearwater, Florida. And then the other one is a banner hanging from our building, and that's a 12-story building, just to give you an idea of how large that banner is. And so those 2 banners were sitting in a storage closet for over 1 year. They weren't sure what to do with it. So we got creative and we decided to repurpose that into those reusable bags there on the right. So we took them down to a local seamstress. She sewed up every single inch of the banner, and some of the bags are actually in strips because she used every single bit of each of those banners. And then we got to give each employee received one of these reusable bags. And so now each employee has a little bit of KnowBe4 history. And we diverted about 350 pounds from the waste stream. So totally fun. Everybody loves those bags. And then we have another project coming up. You can see there in the bottom, those are poll banners from our last convention. So we have 1 in-person convention a year. Those are not reusable because they do have the year put on them. They're branded for each year. So we took those poll banners. I went down to the same seamstress and she has them in her offices. She's going to turn them into little bags and then little wire like organizers, and we're going to give those out as swag at our next convention. And so then every person who attends the convention will have a little bit of KnowBe4 history. Next slide. So employee engagement. According to a study by the National Environmental Education Foundation, almost 90% of employees engaged in their company's sustainability work say that it enhances their job satisfaction and overall feelings about the company. So I don't have my own stats to back that up, but anecdotally, I can say that's absolutely true. I do have about 5 pages of employee feedback, all saying how much they love the sustainability efforts that we're doing at KnowBe4. And a big part of that is our zero waste. So definitely cannot say enough about it in employee engagement. Next. So one of the first things we did was create a green team. And that's a picture over there. We adopted our street that we have two headquarter offices in Clearwater, and they're both on the same street. So we adopted that street to clean up. And then, so our green team is called Earth Before, obviously a play on Know Before. It's our environmental group. And again, these Earths, if we call ourselves Earthsters, those are 50 of us spread across the globe. So it's not just US folks. We have people in South Africa and Singapore and Netherlands and all sorts of countries. So first and foremost, they have become our recycling ambassadors. And so when they go through the offices and see people either recycling incorrectly or confused about it or throwing away something they should recycle, or sometimes worse, wish cycling, right, where they throw trash into the recycle bin thinking it should be recycled, these folks step in and kind of tell them, you know, what's going on and why that's not quite right. And then I also, with the help of our Earth Stirs, our Earth Before group, we started a grassroots composting program, because where we are in Clearwater, there's no industrial composting option yet. So they helped us create this grassroots program, and several of us No Stirs just collect up the coffee grounds and fruit scraps and compost them at home each week. Next slide. Again, in employee engagement, this idea came straight from the True Zero Waste training. We created what we call the Know Before Drop and Swap. So we had a month-long program. The True Zero Waste talks about swapping office supplies. We just took it a step further, because at Know Before we typically do. So we actually expanded that. So we collected books and toys and clothing and about 7 different categories of items. And everyone brought stuff in that they were ready to get rid of at home. And we set it out in a centralized location, and then people could go through there and grab what they wanted. We took place in 5 different country offices. At the end of the month in the US offices, we had collected over 276 pounds of items that people had dropped off. And then we still had about 200 pounds of items at the end that had not been collected. So we took those over to a women's center in Clearwater and donated those there. Next slide. So challenges. The diversion rate that we have set, the targets we've set, are pretty aggressive. So we have hit our first target, but to get to the next one, it's definitely going to be more of a challenge. So it's definitely going to take more creativity, more out of the box thinking. So we've explored several ideas, one of which was we were considering a full composting program using a composter. It's called a composter. It's a very large industrial machine, but what it actually puts out is not compost. It's compost-like material. And so that came with several challenges. One is that they're very expensive upfront. They would require electricity constantly, so we'd have to deal with our landlords on that one. And then at the end, we'd still have this output that we couldn't just throw into a garden. We'd still have to figure out what to do with that waste. Since then, and something I really want to impart to everyone here, is that I have discovered that being the squeaky wheel or being annoying actually can pay off. It does pay dividends at times. So at the same time that I was looking at these composter machines, I discovered that there was a place not too far from us, but out of our jurisdiction, that did have a private composting collection provider. So I contacted that person. They said, yeah, you're out of our service range. I'm sorry. And I just kept reaching out and reaching out and reaching out and reaching out. And after 6 months, they finally gave up. They're like, okay, we get it. You really, really want your compost collected. So they service their entire range, and they will start to also service our office in Clearwater. So that actually is all in the PO process as we speak. So we do have a solution, I'm very excited to say. And then the other thing is that we implemented a zero waste incentive program. And again, that idea came from True Zero Waste. And that was to collect creative, innovative ideas from our employees about how to reduce waste at work. Full transparency, it hasn't really yielded the type of suggestions we were hoping for. I was hoping for kind of some large picture ways to reduce waste in the offices. And what we've gotten are some really great ideas about how to reduce waste in your everyday life. So I've taken all of those fantastic ideas, and I do blogs about those. And I say, hey, look at what your fellow Nosters are talking about. So I'm getting people to think about zero waste and then sharing their good ideas. And so it's been a very satisfying program, but it hasn't really yielded the waste reduction in our offices the way I'd hoped. Next slide. So I'm at the end of my presentation. This is just a shameless plug. I did write a book very recently called Sustainability is for Everyone, Beginning Steps to Creating a Sustainability Program for Your Business. So it's available for pre-order right now. The published date is January 19th. I believe right now the ebook is available, but as we get closer to January, the paper book and the audio will be available as well. So with that, I just want to thank you all again. I want to thank my panel members and the Zero Waste Conference, and I believe we are going to turn it over to questions.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you all so much for these fantastic presentations. So the three of you are absolutely inspiring. And I love that we were able to hear from such a variety of contexts. We really kind of covered so many different parts of the materials management lifecycle, which made it really exciting and useful. So thank you all for sharing your expertise. And so with that, we will head into questions. So for all our folks in the audience, please feel free to add yours in the chat. And we'll kind of try to get to a good variety and kind of hear from everyone. But we do have one first question, and it's for Sarah. So Sarah in the audience asks, can you please explain more about the rebates? What exactly was it for and who provided them?
Sure. So I mentioned in my presentation that Smart Waste is R2V3 certified, and what that means is that we are responsible to report the downstream vendors and process of focused materials such as electronic materials, servers, PCs, laptops, batteries, any universal waste type of material. And we have a partnership with several downstream providers and recyclers that can handle this material. So during our decommissioning, we had IDF rooms, which are data center rooms that each floor would plug into. And during that time, we recovered some value within those IDF rooms, and we were either able to sell it, refurbish it, and sell it. And then that's how they were able to then get compensated for it. And then Smart Waste is the company that will pay them after we triage it. So triage usually takes around 90 days for us to test it, market it, and then find a home for it. If there's an expectation that that for sure that you have high value material in there, we could potentially bid it prior, but oftentimes you're not going to get as much money in that way. So hopefully that answers your question. Very good question.
Thanks, Sarah. Our next question comes from Stephanie, and they ask, do any of you have any resources on how to calculate greenhouse gas emissions before and after implementing zero waste policies?
I use waste technologies. Some of us on the call might be familiar with IoT sensors for collection and dumpsters. So some of the providers that Smart Waste partners with, we use, and I just did a vendor form about this on the answer, but it's I want to try to find it for you so I can give you an intelligent answer. The sensor technology that we uses it based on the EPA standard for CO2 greenhouse emissions, and we're calculating basically the average emissions that are omitted by a refuge truck or a recycling truck coming to your facility or not, and that's calculated on a daily or weekly or monthly basis, depending on the type of service that location is utilizing. So if we're tracking your front end load dumpsters, then we're able to report back on greenhouse gas emissions using the EPA standards. So we have because right now we want to be able to have like a basic standard that we all abide by, and right now that's kind of the one that we're all abiding by. I will find out those exact details and put it in the chat so you can have that information.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next question is for Lael from Moji. have you shared the list of materials you're working to divert with all the KnowBe4 employees in that course that you mentioned? And what kinds of incentives are offered for sharing creative ideas?
Great question. Yes, so in the training, right now it does list all of the materials that we are diverting, and we're going to gear a second training for international. Right now it's all together, and we realize that our international offices recycle different things than our US offices, and so we're kind of separating those. But I've shared that in the blogs and in our report write-ups and that sort of thing, the wrap-up. So I've shared it in several different ways and in some of those videos that I talked about. And then we do have actual closets in each of our headquarters where they can drop off the e-waste or the office supplies, or, there's, I think, 11 things that we actually recycle on behalf of our employees as well. So things they can bring from home and recycle. So that's all there. And I'm sorry, what was the second part of the question?
What kinds of incentives are offered for sharing creative ideas?
Okay, so there's two different things. We have something that's very KnowBe4 centric, which is called flag swag. Actually, you can see it here. It's pins that we put on flags. So if you do something like, if you do a volunteer day, you'll get a flag swag, or if you sign our Nostra climate pledge, you get flag swag. So we have flag swags for everybody who submits an idea. So at this point, I've handed out, I think, 18 of these flag swag pins to everyone who's suggested anything. And then any idea that we actually implement, we either give a gift certificate to Amazon or a vacation day.
That's great to hear. Next question is for Natalie. What were some common challenges that businesses reported having when implementing compostable or reusable products in their stores?
I hate to say it, but probably cost. Just given that right now styrofoam is so cheap as compared to compostable products. So we, in the instances where businesses were sort of pushing back on the financial burden that implementing compostable products was going to have for them, we really highlighted that accessories should only be provided on demand, and to sort of limit the amount of product that's even given to the customer. So I'm not really familiar with across the country, but at least in California, there's a lot of local policies and state policy around like skipping the stuff, only giving out straws on demand, only giving out cutlery when it's asked for. So ideally, if businesses do that, they're saving money because they're not even giving out those products. So we tried to kind of find a balance. Like, yes, compostable products right now are a little more expensive. Hopefully that changes as we just start to implement more policies that encourage compostable products over cheaper options like styrofoam. And then just finding cost savings for the business where possible. The city of Palm Springs was fortunate enough to have a scholarship fund, that at least that took the sort of initial burden off of businesses. So if other organizations or municipalities do have some extra funds to be able to support the businesses financially, it can be something to help.
And do those scholarship funds fund a particular reusable, or kind of how do those get deployed?
At least for the city of Palm Springs, it was a pretty all-encompassing scholarship to just support the business. I think most businesses did purchase products with that money. It was $750 per fiscal year. So that is certainly not enough to buy a dishwasher, which is a big challenge for businesses that want to implement reusables, or to support an additional staff that, you need more staff time for washing reusables. So usually it was to purchase new products that fit the acceptable list of compliant products, or to encourage them to subscribe to recycling or compost service, which in some cases it was more expensive for them. So the city was sort of offsetting that cost with the scholarship. And it really just showed businesses that they were supported too, because $750 is not a lot, but at least it did show the businesses that the city was doing what they could to provide them resources to get them, going off the ground.
Our next question pops back to Lael. It sounds like you moved pretty quickly at KnowBe4, and I just kind of wanted to hear about that time frame and how you were kind of able to hit the ground running and kind of go like boom, boom, boom with all of those different things at once, because it's a lot of little projects.
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. So as background, I came from city government. It's kind of the exact opposite of private industry. So, trying to achieve what I achieved at KnowBe4 probably would have taken 3 or 4 years in government, but because we had the backing, absolute backing of our senior staff, our CFO, our CEO from the beginning, it was just, we were able to achieve everything. So I came in there with a pile of ideas that I wanted to achieve, and hadn't been able to do it yet. And so each one that I said, okay, how about if we do this? Every single one of them was given the green light. And then we had our staff is just really excited about the sustainability initiative. So everybody jumped on board and helped with that. And there was just no stops along the way. So I think and I apologize for people in government, it's just the nature of the beast. It's nothing to say about a particular government. I'm apologizing because I feel your pain, because I know it's probably going slower than you would like it, but you'll get there. But if you're in private industry and you do have the backing of senior management, then you'll probably be able to move rather quickly. It's exciting to see and it's surprising to see, but if you have sort of the enthusiasm of the employees and the backing of the senior staff and somebody who's a total nerd about sustainability like I am, then you can achieve a lot very quickly.
I definitely would have to echo that. In my experience with working with enterprise businesses and somebody at the senior level, once you get their buy-in and they kind of give you a level of autonomy, and also getting trained on who's who in the zoo, because when you have big entities, oftentimes you're working multi-layered management. So you're, working in different layers of management. So definitely things can move faster in corporate entities versus the public. I work in public sector too, so I know that it could take a little bit of time. Working with school districts and federal organizations take a little bit more time. You have more layers, more bureaucratic stuff to go through.
Wonderful. Well, I do have one more question for Sarah, but we do have a little bit of time if people want to keep adding things to the chat. I think we can probably get to a few more. So Sarah, I'm kind of curious how you position sustainable decommissioning to people who think it's unnecessary or added hassle. I'm sure you've met so many people who fall into that camp and are kind of a pro at kind of navigating that at this point.
I don't like fighting with them. That's the first thing. If they don't see the value and they don't hold the same value systems that Smart Waste has, which our values are transparency, circularity, and people. So I kind of vet the clients that, I work with, because I don't want to fight with them about implementing sustainable measures. But I will ask them I will ask them permission to ask them very direct questions like, is saving money something is important to you? Is putting money back in your general fund or decreasing costs and labor important to you? And asking business questions versus sustainable questions, because oftentimes business questions are not they're business. It's sometimes I think we get into this difference of opinion around sustainability or zero waste, where we're talking dogmatic principles, right? And lifestyle and beliefs and thought process, which sometimes could feel like I'm preaching to somebody, right? So I try to ask direct business questions that are less on the whole, let me convert you to my way of thinking thought process, and focus on the things that I think people tend to really care about in corporations, which is decreasing costs and minimizing labor and risk. So I will focus on those things. That's a good question, because
I think that's great advice. Ashpreet asks, are there any job opportunities in your company, sort of in waste management and sustainability, and asking to all our panelists?
Unfortunately, there are not currently at KnowBe4. I wish there were, but we just hired an environmental manager, and so that was all we had.
I actually am looking for someone part-time, so I'm glad that someone asked that. I am looking for someone to help me in the San Francisco Bay Area with implementation of programs. Some of our clients, I do need some support with implementing some of our zero waste programs within the Bay Area. So that region is from San Francisco to San Jose area. I know it's kind of a big area, but you know, somebody that's interested in implementing programs and working in the field, feel free. I put my email in the chat. Feel free to email me your resume. And yes, it does include East Bay. I live in Milpitas, which is really close to the East Bay. And I also just hired someone down in Southern California to help me with my Southern California locations.
And I will say at Recreate, we are also in need of at least one part-time to full-time person. So if anyone is located in the Southern California area, Greater Los Angeles, and are interested in working directly with businesses, a lot of our work as of recent has been around SB 1383 implementation and edible food recovery. So that is where we have a need. But yeah, I'll also put my email in the chat.
Great. Well, I think that's a good place to end. Kind of always fun to end on an opportunity for growth. So I just want to thank again all of our speakers. They were just so fantastic, and I learned a lot. And also, as Sarah said, to all of our audience who came and took the time out of their, I'm sure, extremely busy days to meet everyone, hear about zero waste, provide some extra context in the chat. So really thank you to everyone who's here. And as our speakers have said, feel free to connect with us, and we'll look forward to talking to you, whether throughout the conference or kind of after. So thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.